Here is Chapter 3 for the PSYC 362 Psychology of Gender class.
This slide is on gender ideologies and attitudes. And the book defines gender ideologies as attitudes towards men's and women's roles. It further differentiates three different types of gender ideologies. The first being traditional gender ideology, which maintains that men's sphere is work and women's sphere is in the home. And the implicit assumption here is that men have greater power than women. An egalitarian gender ideology maintains that power is distributed equally between men and women, and that men and women identify equally with the same spheres. A transitional gender ideology is somewhere in between. So this is the third ideology, and an example of this would be that a typical transition gender ideology is thinking that it's acceptable for women to devote energy to both the work and the family domains, but that women should be more responsible in the home, so proportionally their time should be spent, or a greater proportion of their time should be spent in the home, and men should be focusing more of their time and energy on work. This slide has two different concepts. It has benevolent sexism and sexism towards men. I'm going to talk a little bit about the second concept, sexism towards men. And this idea that women can be sexist towards men is somewhat controversial in other parts of the literature. There's a large camp that holds that while women might have prejudice towards men, they can't fundamentally be sexist, because sexism implies that it's someone in a position of power that's discriminating against somebody in a lesser position of power. So if our society is patriarchal, then by the very definition of sexism, women can't be sexist towards men, although they can have prejudice and biased ideas and behaviors. And while this might be a semantic differentiation, both groups are typically asserting very similar things, that hostility towards men potentially originates from resentment of patriarchy, includes the perception of some type of negative attribute towards men, and or the belief that men are sexually aggressive, a particular negative attribute. This slide defines homophobia and transphobia. So the definition of homophobia through the book is a fear of homosexuals or fear of being associated with homosexuals. And transphobia is a revulsion and irrational fear of transgendered and transsexual persons, cross-dressers, feminine men, masculine or masculine women. And both of these terms reflect negative attitudes towards the LGBTQIA community. Additionally, though, negative attitudes based on sexual orientation have also been referred to as heterosexism or sexual prejudice. And the use of these three terms has not necessarily been uniform, the three terms being homophobia, heterosexism, or sexual prejudice. But heterosexism refers more broadly to negative attitudes of non-heterosexual individuals, whereas sexual prejudice is even more all-encompassing in that it also includes prejudice against heterosexuals. On this slide, I'm not going to read the bullet points. I'm just going to add a little bit of additional information about the backlash effect. So according to the backlash effect, people are penalized for displaying counter-stereotypical behaviors. In this way, women often experience a double-edged sword. So for example, with perceptions of leadership, women are criticized for engaging in purely communal behaviors that are viewed as being contrary to leadership roles. So this might be behaviors that demonstrate care and compassion. However, they're also critiqued for engaging in purely agentic behaviors that are in alignment with a leadership role but are also counter-stereotypical to their gender. So these might be behaviors that demonstrate agency, strength, and decisiveness. So I'm sure that you guys can also think of ways that there's a backlash effect for men as well as for women, but this was one particular example. This is the end of chapter 3, and I just wanted to put in here an additional reminder to take the quiz. Make sure that you post your thoughts on the discussion board on Blackboard, and also just to let you know that we're going to continue to discuss sex-based discrimination in chapter 12.